President-elect Barack Obama's change model remains in doubt as the president-elect adds to his cabinet. Are his faces he's putting in there way too familiar to bring up change and hope? In the pundit pit to discuss that and a little bit more, Julie Rodzinski. She's right here. I could touch her. In fact, I'm gonna. There you go. She's a former Corzine Communications director. Coming out from door number 1, Georgette Mossbacher. She's a New York delegate and a Republican fundraiser and a wonderful woman, according to Julie. I've never met her. And Benjamin Barber's here, former advisor to President Bill Clinton. And have I mentioned Rich Lowry, his third cup of coffee, ready to go, editor of the National Review. All right, Rich, welcome. Julie, I'm going to start with you. Are you concerned, happy, pleased, dissuaded, dismayed that it is this Barack Obama cabinet looks like a Clinton cabinet? I'm
not sure it's a Clinton cabinet. I think it's a cabinet with a lot of experience, but the change message that I think Obama was talking about is change from Bush, not change for the sake of change, but change for the past 8 years, and he's getting it.
Georgette, I guess cool. Julie missed. Julie missed the primary, Georgette, where they went at each other.
Look, I think it's interesting because his pick of Hillary Clinton for Secretary of State. I mean, after all, I think she'll make a good Secretary of State, but there's this 600-pound gorilla in the room. That's called Bill. And when Obama has a policy that Bill thinks isn't quite right, all he has to do is say, honey, let's tweak it a little bit.
Benjamin, is that true?
You want the gorilla ranging around in your front lawn or in the living room where you can control what he does. So this puts Bill on the inside, not the outside, and that's very useful.
I want the gorilla in my front yard, not my living room.
Right. Don't you think we go past this? Speaking of gorillas, don't you think the gorilla's been sidelined, so to speak, because Senator Hillary Clinton's got 8 years of senatorial experience. She's run on her own. Yes. She ran for president on her own. Don't you see that, Rich?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a brilliant move in terms of politically co-opting the Clintons, because instead of being an outside power sphere on her own in the Senate, now he's brought her in. She has to dismantle her entire political organization. She can't do any political events.
He spent a fortune. He spent millions of dollars trying to keep her off of the front page of the newspapers.
There's also substance here. There's also substance. We're not just talking about the politics of it. This is a woman who is fit to be Secretary of State, who will make a terrific Secretary of State. That's what counts. We can politicize it, but the reality is...
True, but what makes a great Secretary of State is a Secretary of State that is in sync with their president.
Right.
That's the big question.
They have power. And here's the big question. Will there be a State Department Clinton, and will there be a White House Obama, Rich? Because she's picking her own staff, remember that.
Well, I don't know. We'll see how it works. I mean, there are potential tensions between her and Obama, and also between her and the National Security Advisor. We don't know how it's going to work. They apparently have a fairly reasonably warm relationship since the end of the primaries, but it remains to be seen.
Look, Baker and Bush won got on great. That's terrific. Kissinger and Nixon prayed together, but otherwise didn't much like each other. He was still a terrific Secretary of State. It's not just how intimate they are, but whether they can.
And remember, as Powell was a star, but he wasn't appeared. It didn't appear as though he had Bush's backing, so therefore he was somewhat isolated and not really looked up to.
Ronald Reagan appointed his big primary arch rival George Bush as his vice president.
Julie,
you can't say that people can't come together.
So let's just think about that for a second. Also, let's talk about tax cuts. The tax cuts that might not happen for the middle class, the tax increases that might not happen for the upper class. Big news happened over the weekend. We'll get the reaction from both sides of what it means for us economically. I have 2 seconds to spare. I'm going to just stare.
His largest pet pharmacy.
Today, President-elect Barack Obama will name his key members of his economic team. Federal Reserve Board member Timothy Geithner will become Treasury Secretary, as you know, and former Clinton Treasury Secretary Larry Summers will be the head of the National Economic Council. Obama's advisors say he'll be putting forward this huge stimulus package between $500 and $700 billion. Listen to this.
In my view, it has to be between $500 and $700 billion, and that's because our economy's in serious, serious trouble.
But if we want to create jobs now, we want to create certainty now, why wouldn't we lower taxes? And if we really want to help the economy, why wouldn't we have the president-elect say, I am not going to raise taxes on any American in my first 2 years in office?
Wait a second. If he was going to spread the wealth, is he going to do it now, Julie, by saying to President Bush's tax cuts due to expire in 2010, I'm going to get rid of them now? Do you think he'll do that?
No, I think they're sending very clear signals that they're not raising taxes on anybody because they want to stimulate the economy, and rightly so. I will say John Boehner's had his 8 years to try it his way. We see where the economy is now. I think it's time for people to come together on both sides and give the Obama try, an opportunity.
By leaving the Bush tax structure in place, Georgette?
Yeah. I think that's the right thing to do. You know, it's a complete flip-flop from what he was saying during the campaign, and I think he's going to make the far left really angry. But I think you're going to see him flip-flop on that, which is, by the way, the right thing to do.
But America doesn't care really about flip-flopping. We already picked a guy.
What's flip-flopped is the global economy.
Exactly.
That's what's flip-flopped. And if this president doesn't change his views and does what he said 6 months ago, the world is in trouble. So what he is doing is being a realist about where we are, what he said before, and what he needs to do now to re-inspire confidence among consumers the world over.
The global economy flip-flopped during the campaign, and he would not admit that it was an extremely foolish idea to propose raising taxes in the middle of a recession. He wouldn't admit that. But it's good that he's probably going to abandon it now. He has to abandon everything that would discourage people from hiring new workers, whether it's the protectionism, cap and trade, all that stuff.
Julie, go ahead.
Bush stuck to this ideology of his, despite what global events were doing. Now the administration is paralyzed because events have overtaken their ideology. At least Obama is being realistic enough to say, look, enough is enough. We need to try it a different way, whatever the ideology.
But Julie, doesn't seem the same.
$700 billion financial rescue. How does that constitute being paralyzed?
What have they done since then? They have, you know, the big three.
It was $700 billion. What is the Federal Reserve doing? Every day it's pumping liquidity into the system.
And his idea for a stimulus package is to go out there and make the United States government the employer. Look, we need to incentivize small business. Those are the job creators. I mean, to go and that's central government. I mean,
folks, you've been saying over and over again, one president at a time. And it's interesting that Obama's already getting the blame for what Bush has been failed to do. If it's one president at a time, let's wait for January 20th and give the new president a chance.
Wait till January 20th.
But then blame Bush. Blame Bush.
And they need to get to we don't need to blame anyone. What we need to do is get both of these men together, the future president and the seated president, and get them to do something right.
Well, that's why Tim Geithner was the guy.
That's what James Baker proposed yesterday on Meet the Press.
Well, look, I think you're going to have a big stimulus plan, but I'm very skeptical. I'm very skeptical of this infrastructure spending. It takes a long time to get online. It's not as though everyone who's getting laid off by Citigroup is going to go, pick up a shovel and, dig out roads across the country. It's kind of a 1930s model that I think is outdated.
Benjamin, Julie, Rich, and Georgette, great job, wonderful pit. Now you can party for the rest of the